Hi, and welcome to my YouTube channel. My name is Caroline, and earlier this year I completed my BA illustration degree. I'm now working towards making illustration my full-time career. This year I've decided to participate in Fairy Little Peach's Peachtober challenge. I decided to set myself a theme for all the prompts, which is to include a frog or some kind of frog element within the piece. This is just to bring a bit of consistency to all the illustrations I complete and make them look more like a collection. I also just really love frogs, so any excuse to illustrate them I'll take. As you can see on screen, the first day's prompt was caves. I don't particularly like caving after going once on a school trip. It's the only time I've ever felt claustrophobic, and I thought I was going to be stuck there forever. Luckily I made it out though, or otherwise I wouldn't be here doing Peachtober this year. I decided to channel this fear for the idea behind the illustration. I drew a small frog stuck alone in the cave, God knows how he got there, but luckily he does have a torch on him to light his way. However, there are some looming eyes in the background, so he might unfortunately have some monsters or demons hunting him down, but hopefully it's just his imagination and that they're not really there. I had some fun with the piece, especially playing around with some metallic paints. I used the silver to suggest the light coming out of the torch, and a goldy bronze colour for the eyes in the background. Unfortunately, you can't see it very well while the painting is laid flat, but in the final clip I moved the piece slightly so you can see the shine of these areas better. The style I'm using for all these pieces is quite a cartoony one. I've been developing it for the past year, and I've mainly used it in illustrations aimed for children. I've not really done a lot of backgrounds in this style, so I'm really hoping to explore this for the Peachtober prompts this year, especially to try doing some quite diverse ones. I've done 2 interior ones before, one being a bedroom scene and the other a kitchen scene, as well as an outside park scene, so it was really fun to explore a cave setting as it's not something I typically draw much. The second day's prompt was dandelion. As soon as I saw this, I had the idea of the dandelion being a big umbrella for someone to take shelter during a storm. At first I thought I could maybe do a play on dancing in the rain, by having this frog dressed in a suit and hat, swinging around the stem of the dandelion like it's a street lamp. But then I also liked the idea of being able to clearly see the disruption of the rain stream caused by the dandelion. Therefore, I needed my figure to fit perfectly under the dandelion, so they would just be fully sheltered from the storm. I still liked the idea of going with a performer though, as it meant I could illustrate them doing what they specialise in to pass the time during the storm. At first I thought I could maybe do a ballerina, but I thought it'd be a bit sad for her to dance without any music. So ultimately I decided on doing a mariachi band. I just think they have some really pretty decorative outfits and of course some great music. I have one frog playing a trumpet while the other is playing a guitar and singing a nice little song. I had never illustrated a dandelion before this, so it was quite an interesting process to figure out how I wanted to do it, especially as I decided to do it when it's just about ready to let its little seed pods go. So it's that weird white fluff ball stage, and it's also kind of semi-translucent in a way, as you can still see the middle. Therefore, I painted the middle first and then did light washes on top to replicate this. After that, I did some marks like stars to represent the tops of the seed pods that float away. I later on go in with some white gouache and add some more stars and other marks to really enhance its circle shape. I'm actually quite happy with how it came out, considering I had never drawn a dandelion before. Funnily enough, one of my favourite parts of painting this piece was the rain in the background. It was just very therapeutic to do the same marks over and over again in different shades. I kind of thought I messed up at one point because I wanted a lighter raindrop shade compared to the background wash I had already done. I'd also realised I would be using a lot of white gouache for the actual dandelion, so I didn't really want to use it for the raindrops as well, because it would then mean the dandelion just wouldn't stand out as well against the background. I ended up trying to do a lifting technique. I found this worked quite well. It gave me that lighter raindrop shade that I wanted while not competing with the brightness of the white gouache, allowing the dandelion to pop against the background. You don't see me do this on camera, but I do go in with a black pencil for the outfits of the two frogs. I felt that the shading just wasn't as dark as I wanted it to be, so I used the pencil to darken these areas. I think this makes them stand out a lot better. The third day's prompt was cowboys. I've actually drawn quite a few frog cowboys in the past, so I had a lot of fun doing this and felt very comfortable illustrating it as I've done it many times before. I kept the background quite simple for this one, as I wanted the character to stand out and be the main focus. I just added a couple stars and a yee-haw to fill the negative space at the bottom. I don't have too much to say on this piece. I am happy with how it turned out, and luckily I didn't have any problems while painting it, so I'll just use this time to tell you about the supplies I'm using for all the illustrations. I'm painting each piece in watercolour, and the main palettes I'm using is the Windsor and Newton cotman set, the Davenport Brights set, and I'm dabbing a bit into my Kuretake 36 palette set, although I'm mainly just using that one for the black or metallic paints. I'm also using a little bit of white gouache that I've been mixing into the paint for the outlines. This is just so I can create an opaque colour that contrasts well against the translucent nature of watercolour. I only really started painting this way in the summer, and I've been really enjoying practicing it in Peachtober so far. It's also helpful to see if I do want to continue painting this way, or whether I need to take a different approach. I normally use coloured pencils as well when I work with watercolours, just to add extra details on top, or in the past I have also used it for the line work, but I really want to avoid that for this challenge. Just to push my painting skills, as I always rely on the coloured pencils as a backup to fix everything at the end. I'm posting each illustration I'm doing for Peachtober daily on my Instagram and TikTok. You can find my Instagram at arty_caro and my TikTok at artycaro without the underscore. If anyone else is also doing Peachtober or any other prompt list this month, I'd love to see the ideas you're coming up with, so feel free to put your social media handles in the comments so I can look at your work. This is pretty much my first proper attempt of doing an art prompt list in October. I did have a go in 2019 at Inktober, but it was my first year of uni and it was quite challenging to do while getting used to the balance of uni workload at the same time. I ultimately did finish it, but I wasn't very happy with how a lot of the drawings came out, and they were more doodles than final illustrations, so this year I really wanted to push myself to come up with more finalised work. Especially coloured work as well, because I only did black and white drawings for it in 2019, and at most I added a bit of ink wash to some of them for shading. So far, I've been having a lot of fun doing these pieces every day, and I'm hoping to keep up the momentum. I have a notes list on my phone where I've brainstormed ideas for each prompt, so hopefully I won't lose any steam by the end of October. I do leave it open though on the day if I feel I have some other inspiration and want to change my original idea for that prompt. Day 4's prompt was tigers. I was really excited for this one, as I had a cute idea to have a little frog perched on top a tiger's head in the river. Although I don't imagine the frog to feel very happy about this, and I can imagine him thinking to himself, "Stay still, channel be in the water, Lily. This tiger can't know I'm on him or I may be his next meal." I've drawn tigers a couple of times in the past, but I've never really done them in colour before, so it was still quite a bit of a challenge. I was actually quite frustrated for a lot of this piece, as I was worried that it wasn't turning out quite right. But I think I just needed to step away and come back to it, as I do quite like how the final result turns out, and I think it looks enough like a tiger. It is an animal I want to draw more, and it's the same for wild cats in general, like lions, as it's just a subject matter that when I come to draw it, I feel very unsure and not very confident about, as well as have looming thoughts that it's just not turning out right, but I just need to practice more to stop this. It's kind of the same for foxes as well, so I don't really know why, but wild cats and foxes seem to be my weakness. I normally draw a lot of animals, so I'm quite confident in general, especially dogs and cats, and obviously frogs. I draw a lot of frogs. I had some fun painting the water, as I tried a technique I've not really done before. It's one I've seen online a few times, where you do a base light wash and then using a mid-tone you create these blobby circle shapes on top and fill in the negative space between them. You then do that all again in an even darker shade on top, but kind of shifted from the medium tone layer so bits of the two previous layers can be visible underneath. I think it's quite effective, but I do think I need to practice it a bit more, although it was really fun and I'm quite happy with how it turned out, as it's my first time attempting it. In general, my favourite part of an illustration is doing the final details. I love creating dots, lines and repeating patterns. I especially find it more satisfying when using gouache, because it's just so opaque and bright. It stands out really well. I think it's also my favourite part because it's like that final stretch, you're nearly done. The final details were quite important for this piece. I think it really brought it all together, especially for the tiger. I think it made him stand out a lot more. And it was just really fun. It's probably the piece I've done so far with the most small details, with the small lines and dots for the tiger himself to represent the fur, as well as loads of dots in the water to suggest bubbles. Day 5's prompt was bow. I'm quite a big Doctor Who fan. I've grown up watching it, and I even watched some classic before the modern Doctor series started, but I was a toddler at the time, so I don't really remember the stories very well. Although the one thing I do remember is loving Tom Baker with his wacky scarf and the fact that he always offered people jelly babies. Anyway, I just couldn't resist doing a Doctor Who themed illustration, especially since the 11th Doctor is obsessed with bow ties. I mean, as I've written in the piece itself, one of his most popular catchphrases was "bow ties are cool." I ultimately decided to just draw the Doctors who feature a bow tie in their main outfit, which was the 2nd Doctor, 3rd Doctor, and of course, the 11th Doctor. I do know other doctors wear bow ties at some point, especially when they're in tuxedos like Jodie in the most recent era. But it just would have been too many doctors to fit onto the small piece of paper I'm using, as I'm only illustrating these at about 13.5 centimetres both height and width, so it's not the largest size to work with. I wanted to keep these illustrations quite small as I wanted them to feel manageable to do every day, especially ones where I do explore doing a bit more of a detailed background or just detailed composition in general. I didn't give this piece a background as I thought it didn't really need one. I chose to do the catchphrase in the vibrant orangey red because the main colours that stand out from the doctor outfits are warm tones, so it matches the overall palette better. I really enjoyed doing this piece as I've not done much Doctor Who fan art and I've never had a chance to mix it with frogs that I also love drawing. Day 6's prompt was trees. I decided to draw a tree house for this day's prompt. This piece is kind of reminiscent of some drawings I would do as a child. I quite liked to draw small little houses in trees that were the homes for small pixie-sized people. I would draw elements like little bridges to connect each house. I remember one drawing in quite some detail where I had added this bubble machine that was supposed to be a form of transport for the pixie people. They would just stand on top of a platform and a large bubble would then develop around them, and then they would just float away to their final destination. To match my frog theme, I added very small snippets of frog elements within the treehouse. This included a frog head painted onto the front door, a flag that has a frog handprint on it, frog fairy lights hanging from the roof, and a frog with a telescope coming out of the watchtower. I used autumn themed colours for the leaves so the frog with the telescope would stand out against them. It was both fun and challenging to work on the piece, as it was more intricate than the previous ones I have done so far. The hardest part was doing the line work. For all these pieces, I am trying to mainly use coloured line work where possible, but I found some of the small elements in this one just didn't stand out with the coloured lines, so I ended up using black. I like to imagine that this tree house is one of many in a forest, but just happens to belong to the frog group, and that's why we see a frog handprint on the flag and a frog head on the door. It's just symbols to represent the group, and it could possibly serve as a reason for why the frog is looking out the watchtower, just scoping down the enemy. But I don't see it as any kind of violent thing, just a childhood game where you have rivalry and at most you're just having water balloon fights or snowball fights. Day 7's prompt was potion. This is one of my favourite ones so far, as I got to draw something that was more spooky. I also recently rewatched Hocus Pocus for the first time in a few years, so I was definitely feeling the spooky vibes for this piece. Unfortunately for frogs, they are quite often main ingredients for witches' spells. Therefore, I decided to draw a frog in the potion bottle alongside other bottles with other well-known ingredients. This included a bottle with eyeballs in, one with fish skeletons, and a bottle covered with cobwebs. I also have a spider dangling down by all of them. I imagine him to be either like a witch's small pet, or that he has simply escaped from the potion bottle with the cobwebs on it. I always think of bright colours when it comes to potions because I think it makes them feel more magical. Therefore, I had a lot of fun playing around with a bright colour palette. As I've previously said, my favourite part is adding small details, so I really enjoyed adding the bubbles in each potion. I really liked how this piece came out. I also really enjoyed painting it, especially being able to use a brighter and more vibrant colour scheme, as my other pieces were a bit more limited in my use of colours and contained more natural tones. This is the end of Peachtober Week 1. Let me know which illustration is your favourite one in the comments below, and I hope you enjoyed the video. I'll see you next time for Week 2's illustrations.